So on April 25th, 2013, 6 MV-22s and 2 C-130s departed from Canada en route to Maroon, Spain as part of the first ever Special Purpose MAGTF crisis response, embarking on what was at that time the largest MV-22 transatlantic flight ever attempted. I was division leader on that flight, responsible for the safe passage of my crew, my aircraft, and the other 2 aircraft in my division. After takeoff, we settled in for the 1,500-mile trip, which was expected to take about 6.5 hours. For context, this is the distance from San Francisco to Dallas over open ocean with nowhere to land. After 4 hours of flight, with about 600 miles to go, we entered significant weather. Headwinds topped out at 50 knots, and we encountered some heavy turbulence. Meteorologists later called this hurricane-like conditions. Excuse me. So there I was in the aircraft, in the clouds, in formation with 7 other aircraft that I couldn't see when my instrument panel lit up like a Christmas tree. Now, if we ran into an emergency that required us to land, our only option was to ditch. Now, if you assume that we survived the deliberate landing in the water, rescue was 12 to 24 hours away, assuming that you could reach them on the radio. Now, the C-130s had multiple ways to reach out to shore in case there was an emergency, but I didn't have that luxury. In my aircraft, the only means that I had to reach out for help in case of an emergency was SATCOM, which has a history of being unreliable. So as we fought the weather and the aircraft, we prayed that we wouldn't have to ditch, and we hoped that we wouldn't have to use SATCOM. Hope, it's not a course of action. And this is an uncontested, permissive, arguably training environment. Well, let's fast forward. It's April 25th, 2020, and you're a platoon commander conducting sea denial operations on Advanced Expeditionary Base in Palawan Island of the Philippines against a peer adversary. That adversary has air and maritime superiority. Their actions in the cyber, information, and space domains have degraded your C2. Now, as part of this fight, your closest support is 375 miles away, embarked on USS America with the Marine Expeditionary Unit that you deployed with. Here, in case of emergency, the only means that you have to reach out for support is SATCOM, which still has a history of being unreliable. Now this is a contested, non-permissive, and definitely not training environment. You begin taking enemy fire from a ship and need to call in for air support. Shells are raining down, and the lives of the Marine in your charge are relying on that successful radio call. You pick up the radio, make your call for fire. Is that link going to work? You hope. Unfortunately, this is the reality presented by the Marine operating concept, and I'm concerned that Marines will be left with hope as their only course of action in a contested environment due to critical vulnerabilities in our SATCOM systems. SATCOM has been one of the primary means for the Marine Corps to reach out beyond line of sight for a number of years. The adversary is aware of that, they've got the means to negate it, and they're not afraid to use it. After all, physics says that satellites are predictable, they're fragile, and extremely vulnerable to interference. Now, unknown to you and your platoon, a jammer has been placed 150 miles to the west in the Spratly Islands, denying SATCOM to the entire AOR, completely denying your ability to reach out for help and defend your position. Good afternoon. My name is Major John Pross, and I'm offering assured communications in a contested environment. I want to empower Marines with the ability to assure their own communications at the decisive point. I want to put national level capabilities in the hands of a tactical platoon commander. I want to do that by way of a rocket. This rocket is going to deploy a communications payload to a near space altitude. That payload will then come under parachute and descend and provide radio relay across the AOR. Now I'm offering an organic tactical augment to SATCOM. Okay, I'm not offering a replacement for SATCOM, right, because that'd be too expensive. Let me show you this might work. Back to our scenario. You're still a platoon commander, taking fire, and you need to call in for support. Your SATCOM link is still down because of the enemy jammer. Only this time, you're properly prepared. Now that your primary means of communication have failed, you simply roll to your alternate, in this case, the rocket. You launch your rocket, which is going to deploy the radio relay to the altitude. That relay is able to receive your call for fire and retransmit it to the ship. And then a section of F-35s that were already airborne and you didn't even know about are retasked to prosecute that target, able to save the lives of you and your Marines. So hope has been replaced by capability. Let me walk you through some numbers here. Now, luckily for this Marine, beyond line of sight communications is not rocket science. Okay, it's just geometry. So what you see here is nominal deployment numbers, ranges and times related to a 200,000 foot deployment. I chose 200,000 feet because if you're NASA, this is a little low. If you're into amateur rocketry, this is a little high. So there's Marine Corps, we're somewhere right in the middle. It's important to note that for the waveforms that we're talking about here, it's all about line of sight. So higher altitude is better. So from 200,000 feet, after that payload deploys, instantaneously can cover over 600 miles. As that payload descends, after 5 minutes, at 133,000 feet, its area of coverage will shrink to just over 400. That payload then continues to descend. After 30 minutes, you're still able to cover over 180 miles to close that link. Now I recognize, in this case, your call for fire, you have 5 minutes to close that link. Now I recognize that 5 minutes doesn't compare with the persistence of SATCOM, but 5 minutes is an awful long time to make a radio call. This is all made possible with emerging technologies like single-board computers and software-defined radios. Single-board computer you see there is a Raspberry Pi 3B+, capable of 2.4 gigahertz processing quad-core, and it's the size of a credit card. On the right here, you see a software-defined radio. This takes traditional transistor, local oscillator type radios we're used to and condenses them down to simple logic gates called field programmable gate arrays, okay, on the order of millions. But they're all reprogrammable for software, which means I can change frequency modulations, schemes on the fly, and then with a single unit, I can cover a much broader range of frequencies. This unit here can cover from 70 megahertz to 6 gigahertz. Now, anytime we talk about enabling technologies, the next question comes up is cost, right, sir, ma'am? Because it's not just about the money, it's all about the money. Well, for the payload, the software-defined radio of the payload, that one's $900. And then the single-board computer, that's the high-end model by Raspberry Pi, and that one's $35. So that puts a total cost of the payload at roughly $1,200, arguably making it disposable from a cost perspective. The rocket upfront costs about $15K with reusable costs about $8K. And if you can retrieve it, that is reusable. So if the enemy wants to shoot a multi-million-dollar missile at this type of capability or track it with a multi-billion-dollar asset, we're still on the right side of that cost and position curve. Now, I recognize that just because something is inexpensive doesn't make it disposable, right? We are the Marine Corps, sir. And so my intel rows in the room are concerned about security, so I'll tell you now that no, you don't have to get online and go pick this thing up after you shoot it, okay? The network architecture here has no knowledge of the signal, except simply receives it and retransmit. There's no demodulation that happens. So all of the encryption, all that happens on the deck, okay, which means you don't need to go pick it up. Now, this isn't just a concept or a good idea. This is a reality. What you see here is a model of a prototype that I was able to build during my time here at NPS. You can see here, you've got the software-defined radio and the single-board computer, and then you see 2 battery packs. This green all up here, this is all the academic research type related requirements. And with this, I was able to demonstrate an over-the-air full duplex relay between VHF to UHF. I demonstrated over 3 kilometers and then simulated all the ranges you see here today. And this is what I was able to do about 8 months with the help of 3 to 4 engineers from the small sat lab while taking 4 other classes. So imagine if we were able to take this kind of capability, transition it to a warfighting lab, and let a full-time professional engineer really seek to operationalize and maximize this kind of capability. And we can do this. We can do this right now. And with it, we can empower tactical operators, ensure their communications, allow them to provide options, right, just giving them flexibility. Flexibility leads to adaptability. Adaptability gives us lethality, so that in the end, hope is no longer our course of action. Thank you.